This video will contain spoilers for Legion episode 5, so if you have not seen the episode, please do not watch this video until you have seen it. So the episode starts out in this weird upside down room. Wasn't sure what's going on there at first, but quickly we discover that it's the interrogation room and Lenny is being interrogated. Now Lenny seems very desperate to see David, and that to me sets off alarms right away because, you know, Shadow King and all that, and she's probably being manipulated but she doesn't know about it yet. So she is being asked questions and she doesn't really remember much about anything other than the fact that she really wants to see David. She doesn't even know how she got there. The agency guy is asking her some questions, and one of the questions he asks is, whose body is that? And at this point I'm thinking, Lenny's dead, so can the Shadow King put minds into dead bodies? Next, we cut to the Shadow King and Oliver, and they start talking about a body. So I'm thinking the Shadow King found his body and they're going to go get that, right? Because the whole season has been focused around the Shadow King's body so far. So at a point, the Shadow King says, but the reward, sunrise like you never seen, unreal. And that comment for sure made me think they found his body, because it sounds like he's thinking about watching the sunrise with his own eyes, I guess. After that, we go to a scene with Oliver digging up the body. Then we get a flashback of them breaking into the base, I think like two episodes ago. Their main goal was to get this gun all along. After digging up the body, it doesn't look like they took it with them, and it looked like they did something to it with the gun, because Oliver says how much is required while holding the gun, and the Shadow King says the smallest amount. Next, we get a new interviewer for Lenny. It's the guy that can remember everything and look at everyone's memories. Lenny does something weird here. She asks what color are my eyes, and then she proceeds to change her eye color to blue. Now that's really weird, and Lenny tries really hard to convince him that she is a good guy and she's not being controlled by anyone. And when looking into her memories, he sees all the stuff she talked about, like her grandma and things like that, but there's also some memories of flowers on the ground and some other stuff that doesn't really quite make sense. At the moment, that didn't seem like a big deal, the flowers and all the other imagery, but it would become a big deal later on. After that, we see a scene of the weird crawly thing going into his ear as well, and I think that will be really relevant towards the end of the season, but for now, we don't really know what that is or what it represents. After that, we see a shot of this guy, and I thought he was dead, so I'm really confused as to why she is in her memories. And then we get a scene of what's actually happening at the very moment, and that is the guy is actually trying to kill her, and I don't know why or what happened. Something went terribly wrong while looking through her memories. Next, we cut to the lesson of the episode. And little did we know that this lesson would be a big deal for this episode, because this whole episode I have been looking for patterns, and well, sometimes looking for patterns will not give you your answer. We go back to Oliver and the Shadow King, and it looks like they're scoping out a car, and I assume again this is where his body is and that's why they're doing this. And Oliver is saying something very interesting. He says, I'm going to kill you, you know. And that threw me off completely, because this whole time I thought Oliver was, you know, working with the Shadow King. But it turns out he's a prisoner just like Lenny was, I guess. Or Lenny could still be a prisoner, we don't know. I feel like this is some major foreshadowing or an omen for what's to come. They proceed to follow this weird vehicle. We cut back to Lenny and we finally see David, and David says you're still working for him, the Shadow King. But at this point it's not really a surprise, because that's basically the only way you can get out is by working for him. And she says it's not her idea, as if the idea has been implanted in her head. And when she said that, everything started to kind of make sense, like all the weird creatures crawling into people's ears. So think of it this way. Those could be the ideas going into people's heads, right? And the idea would be to help the Shadow King. So it's possible that the Shadow King has been putting ideas in people's head from the very beginning, and David was maybe the very first one. Lenny finally says she was sent here to tell him that he found his body. After that, some weird things start to happen. David starts to see some memories that don't belong to her, and it seems like that David can recognize the memories too. And after that, Lenny's eye color changes to blue again. We cut back to Oliver and the Shadow King following the car. Oliver says he found the Shadow King's weakness, but it looks like the Shadow King took it as a joke. Oliver gives the Shadow King a hint, and the hint is, what is 1 plus 1? And this will be a huge significance later on in the story, I think. Right now, it doesn't make much sense, but I have a feeling that it's gonna play a huge role. My opinion on this is the answer is probably fish, because that makes the most sense, right? We cut back to Lenny and David, and again, Lenny says she has no idea how she got here, doesn't really have any memories. The only memory she really has is her coming out of the ground, basically. And the spot she came out of, it looks like the spot that the Shadow King and Oliver was at earlier in the episode. It wasn't his body, it was her body, and I assume they were leaving it there. Next we see David's sister and her husband, and turns out the car they were following belonged to David's sister's husband. Look how upfront the flowers are in this shot. That sets off some alarms in my head. And the fact that the Shadow King was following them, nothing good can come out of this. We cut back to Lenny again, and she says maybe he found my body. We cut back to the sister and Oliver again. Oliver looks very menacing in this shot, and I don't really know what's going to happen. For a moment I thought that Oliver was actually going to kill her, because it did look like that. But he didn't really kill her, he just knocked her out. Oliver proceeds to use that strange gun on David's sister, and we see all of this through David's powers, basically. So at the end, we find out what really happened. What really happened was that David's sister was turned into Lenny, and then her body was dumped into the desert. So this whole episode, we have been shown all of the events backwards. Overall, this episode was very interesting. Honestly, the first half of this episode was quite boring, mostly because not a lot happened. But the second half really picks up, and the twist at the end was nuts. I would have never expected that. I didn't even know that you can do something like this in this show. The Shadow King took a living body and implanted a mind into it and made it look like the original mind's body. Now the real question is David's sister alive, or what happened to her? And why would the Shadow King do something like this? I mean, I understand that he is a bad guy, but why do this? Was it just to prove a point? And didn't he want David's help to begin with? It looks like the Shadow King wants to really piss David off, and he has succeeded. But for what reason, we don't know. Overall, this was an excellent episode. You really have to watch it twice to appreciate it properly. Another thing I want to talk about is the usage of flower imagery this entire episode. So from the beginning, the show was telling us what really happened. It's just we couldn't really understand it, and this all goes back to the lesson of pattern. This episode does such a good job of throwing the audience off. Like from the beginning, I'm like, okay, this is the Shadow King's body. What happened in the end of the episode is something I would have never predicted, ever. And I really have to give the episode applause for that, because doing the unexpected is getting harder and harder every day because of all the creative things that's happening around the world, all the TV shows. But Legion has found a way to do it, and I am glad. Originally, again, I didn't like the episode as much when I watched it the first time, but watching it the second time, a lot of things really did start to add up. Let me know in the comment section what other types of reviews you would like to see, or on what shows. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment, and consider subscribing to support the channel. If you didn't enjoy the video, you know what to do, and I will see you guys in the next video.
Cool.